Well, welcome everyone. Thank you once again for joining us for the Your Market Pulse update. We are always super excited to be able to share with the not just the real estate community, but also with the consumer, those of you who are actually interested in the value of your home or thinking about buying a home for the first time. And so we've really tried to put together content that you will find valuable. I'm going to share my screen because if I start introducing ourselves before I actually say who we are and welcome everyone, then I've kind of missed the boat of I've got ahead of our slide. So this is our super exciting welcome slide. And it is July 2023 for those of you who are watching this on video later on our YouTube channel. But super excited. I'm Todd Bookspan, and I am one of the co-founders of the Bookspan Baker Team, along with my wife, Tara, and Matt Baker, who will introduce himself in just a sec. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I would say probably what drives me is I'm just a nerd about the economics of what's going on in the market, as well as Matt is too. And so I'm just super passionate to try to figure out how to help people grow wealth through real estate and how to convince first-time home buyers or anyone who's a hesitant home buyer that it actually really is a good time to buy. And hopefully we'll do that with the data today. So how you doing, Matt?
I'm doing well. Yeah, my name's Matt Baker, and been in the mortgage business 28 years, a long time, but seen lots of things. And I think our secret sauce is that we can try to explain what can be complicating in a simple a way as possible to hope for everyone to understand. And really our mission today, kind of just jumping right in, just to keep it on track, is 15, 20 minutes max. We're going to go through some of these slides. Of course, there's, you can always ask questions in the chat. And then, of course, talk about economy, the housing market, and rates. I mean, that's kind of our three main topics to talk about today. And so, Todd, I think just from a let's get going standpoint, what is happening in the market, and big news was inflation, and inflation came out actually this morning, and what I want to show you with this graph is that, so the way that the inflation number works is they add up all of the months together to come up with this sort of headline inflation number. And what you see on the left-hand side is June of 2022 of 1.2%. And then you see these other, obviously that's really high. And then this month, June of 23, which came out today, is 0.2. And so what happened is you replaced this 1.2 number with a 0.2 number, which basically gave us a 1% reduction in inflation. Good news, because inflation has really been the main driver of interest rates going up. And you can see that here in the following slide. This is kind of the breakdown of both the headline number and the core number. And you can see this like steady decline from June of 22 all the way to now. The blue line is your headline number, and then the orange, or I guess it's not orange, reddish, maroon line is actually the headline number, or I'm sorry, the core number. And what's the difference? Well, ironically, we talked about last time, the Federal Reserve tracks all of it, but they spend a lot of effort and energy dissecting the core number. So that purple line. The blue line is the headline number. So that gets all the flashy media attention. But the Federal Reserve really looks at that core number. And you can start to see that it was kind of flattened. It flattened out over the last 3 or 4 months, but just really started to head south, which is really what we need to see so that the Fed stops raising rates. Ultimately, they're looking at data like this to determine, should we raise rates to slow the economy down? Because remember, that's the mission of the Fed, is to keep inflation in check, save by increasing interest rates. And so this inflation number coming down is a really good sign. But if you look back at go to the slide, the last slide, you can see that like once that 1.2 number gets dropped off this month, there's a lot of low numbers. Next month is 0, 0.2 the following month. So there's not going to be a lot of inflation movement, to me, over the next 2 or 3 months. We're going to have to get to September and October, which always comes out a month later. So we're talking about November and December before we really start to see inflation kind of come off these levels. Now, the headline number for the first time has us at under 3%. So, you're like, whoa, that's pretty, that's pretty cool, because again, the target for the Fed is 2%. So we're at least getting closer to that number, and that's a move in the right direction. Anything
So
to
I would
add?
say, yeah, I would just say two quick things, right? Inflation is really the arch enemy of long-term mortgage rates. So as inflation went up or interest rates went up, as inflation comes down, interest rates will come down. And so that's really how I try to simplify it when I'm explaining it. And I think the other definition of it is it's too many dollars chasing too few goods. So the reason that the Federal Reserve is trying to make borrowing more expensive is because they were trying to get those dollars to not be available, right? During COVID, everyone got money, had a lot of money in their savings, and there wasn't a lot of supply out there. So, cars was a perfect example. Used cars shot up, to crazy prices, more than new cars, because there was too few cars because of chips, and too many people had money and wanted to buy something new to themselves. So, so I think that's kind of a simple way to look at it.
So yeah, so this is sort of I'll go back to the last one. That my commentary here is inflation has come down, but really the fear is inflation lowering fast enough? And sort of what that purple line, that all items less food and energy, that's the core number. Is it really coming down fast enough? So that's the fear that economists are weighing in on. Are we moving fast enough to that 2% target rate? So the other lag, or the other, what I would call weight, kind of weighing down from rates improving, is the jobs number. And one of the things that last week the jobs report came out and indicated a kind of a robust, what would be appearing to be a robust economy. And so, the robust economy is like, when jobs are moving, when salaries are increasing, when jobs are being added. Todd, it looks like we lost our share screen.
And so with that, oh yeah, there you are. Right? Hold on, let me bring you back.
So when you add all that in to the economy, like, it looks like maybe the economy is stronger than it really is, right? So again, they're looking at this as saying, well, if jobs are still good, people are adding jobs to the market, then the Fed still has work to do, because the cause and effect of raising interest rates should be slowing the economy down. Well, you don't typically see in a slowing economy increase in jobs, right? Those are kind of go hand in hand. And so that's really something that we'll continue to look at here over the second half of the year. If jobs really starts to slow, job growth slows, you hear that in the in headline news and in the media, then you'll start to really say, okay, the Fed, it's working. What the Fed is doing is working. It's slowing the economy down, and that should hopefully lead to an improvement in rates on the short, in the long term. Anything you want to add, Mr. Bookspan?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, the bottom line is that, shockingly, people are still getting hired considerably, although what the contrarians would argue is that they're not really adding the high paying jobs right now. A lot of it's in travel and leisure.
Yeah, and then you would think that on the opposite side, if jobs are struggling, then you would have an additional amount of jobless claims, right? And so you've been hearing stories, if you have followed the media, about layoffs. Like Microsoft talked about more layoffs today, but yet it's not really translating into this jobless claims report. So the jobless claims report is another thing that you would look at to go, hey, you should see an increase in those. And you look at the continuing claims, look at that pinky line, really flat. You look at the blue line up above, I mean, sort of moderate over the last few weeks, just kind of this, kind of in this very, very tight range. You would think that it would start to really increase as the economy was slowing. So that's another thing we're going to continue to look at.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line, right? We're going to continue to watch it and see what happens, because the Fed is really hoping that we start losing people. So, that's really the kind of the important parts of the economy, right? That we talk about: inflation and jobs. Those have been really the two big drivers. So let's switch to housing, because that's what you all care about a lot. And so let's just really talk about home price ranges for a moment. So this is an interesting report. Matt, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, the interesting thought was that obviously 45% of all homes sales are in this 250 to 500 range. So if you're in this price range looking, you would probably see like, wow, that's probably a pretty competitive area, right? You're having multiple offers potentially. There's just more people looking in that space. It's obviously where a lot of first-time home buyers live. And if you remember, we talked about before that there is a that adding families and households to the equation generates a lot of first-time homebuyer activity. And so they all often look at sub 500. The obviously under 100 and under 250 is relatively limited because there's just not a lot of inventory in that space. But I think the most important thing is that if you're shopping in that price range, you're going to need to be fully pre-approved. You're going to need to have everything, all your ducks in a row, kind of throw everything at the listing, at the seller to try to win an offer in that price range because it is really competitive. And then in terms of inventory, it's improved, but you can see it's still really tight. So this is a chart that kind of breaks down, and like every year there's cycles to the real estate market, right? And so you see these ebbs and flows. These are natural. Of course, they were maybe slightly exaggerated. You can see how inventory really decreased from May of 21 into May of 22, and you can start to really see how inventory got impacted with COVID and interest rates so low, people just accelerated their buying. So if they were going to buy in 22 or 21, they probably bought a year before because they wanted to take advantage of mortgage rates being so low. But you can see that we've slowly ticking up inventory, but not enough. I mean, right? Not enough. That number right there, I mean, we probably should be at double that to have a balanced real estate market, and we're still very under inventoried. And if you really look at a Arizona specific level, this is more national, but at Maricopa County in particular, we've just crossed the 5 million people mark, and we've only got about 2 million single family homes. So you kind of can do the math there and realize we're going to be in a low inventory environment for a while. You can't build that many homes in 1 year to rebalance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the thing here to remember is, especially those of you who are Arizona realtors, although we've got some California folks on this evening, it looks like as well, and I think we'll have people watching it from other places, this is what we're all seeing in the news. This is if you're buying a house, this is what you're seeing, and you think this is going to be easy. And we know, the local data provider Cromford report, which we can't share because they won't let us subscribe because we're not real estate agents. But I was reading their information today, and they're showing, decrease in inventory in Maricopa County again. And so I know that from an Arizona perspective, some of you are thinking, oh, this isn't accurate, but it actually is accurate nationally. And this is what we keep seeing, even though we're definitely at super, super low inventory.
And then I just pointed this out because I felt like it was good to show the cycles and how we are obviously significantly under, dating back to 27, 18, 19. You can really see those are all those squiggly lines above with kind of the typical cycle. And look at kind of where we crested so much underneath where we have historically been. Now, 22 was a little lower. You see that red line, how it shot kind of pretty quickly down from June on. That's when rates started to peak. But nevertheless, it's definitely impacted volume. But again, not to the point where one is outbalanced the other. Remember, we talked about before, supply and demand, right, is undefeated. And so if you have supply restraints, meaning, low supply, you're not going to get prices going down. It can't work together. It works opposite, right? With low supply, prices go up. With high supply, prices go down. And so you're just not going to see that when we're still in this really balanced market where there's buyers in the market and there's sellers in the market and there's enough inventory to sort of satisfy both.
Yeah, I think the big conundrum really is the fact that that if a house is sitting, a seller still wants top dollar, even if it's not sitting, even if it's new listing, top dollar, like they could have gotten still a little over a year ago. And then the buyers, though, want or even need a seller concession and they don't want to get it. So I do know if you're a buyer, that's a struggle you're facing. I know if you're a realtor on here, that's a struggle you're facing. And if you're thinking about selling, that's a struggle you're going to face. And so I think it's just, all this data is good for you to be processing as you're getting advice from your super smart realtor.
And then sort of the last thing I wanted to say is, yeah, you started to see, you heard in the media just not too long ago how prices were going down. But when you really look at the adjusted for the seasonality of the market, I mean, we've really started to grow pretty significantly again. And so, it's just a good reminder that we're, look back at this trend line. What I liked is that all these peaks were rolling, but then when we get to some more, when rates spike up and there's that sort of the Fed's involved and really pushing rates either up or down, well, then what happened is you see these now more egregious spikes, right? It's not the sort of normal rolling average, rolling that you would expect in any kind of cyclical seasonal market. You see the more sharp ups and downs. And so what we're seeing is obviously a pretty clear spike and a bounce back in listing price growth. And that's obviously good for sellers. And you would say, well, that's not necessarily good for buyers. But I think last I checked, we all like having our homes go up in value. So it's good for everybody in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so again, here's just one other way to look at the months of inventory on the market. And you can see it's kind of been up and down a little bit. Again, this is the nationwide, but it's just one more way of being able to look at the data that we had on the previous couple of slides.
You got to remember, like in 2011, we were coming out of one of the worst financial crises from the mortgage perspective, and we've just kind of steadily declined in inventory overall on a national level. And I think you could argue that a lot of people are holding tight, waiting for rates to come down before they buy again. And there's strategies that we have that can kind of beat that, and so that you buy now and with the opportunity to refinance later when rates come down. And I think that's always a good strategy in a higher rate market environment. So let's talk about rates. I think that's the next group.
Exactly. So, the $1 million question that ties
the $1 million question. And I threw this in here because I felt like we want to know, what are the experts? And so the experts being Fannie Mae, who sort of write mortgage guidelines. The MBA is the Mortgage Bankers Association, and NAR is the National Association of Realtors. And what do they think rates are going to do? And mind you, they're never right.
Well, they're already off, because we know rates are rates tipped up to the sevens last week, although coming back down.
Rates have spiked up into the sevens, but it just gives you an idea that as a consensus, they believe rates will be better in a year or two. And that's sort of what I would gather from this slide. If you go to the next slide, it really kind of pins it even further and goes, well, look at kind of back even further. And look back even, I think this is like even back to like 2019, kind of where rates were, where they spiked up to, and what they believe they're going to do in the future. So I think that the higher rates are behind us. I think we are in for some better rates. And so, well, why do I think that? Well, if you go to the next slide, you'll see a couple things and this gets a little confusing, but this is what us geeks in the mortgage business look at on a daily basis to say what's rates going. And so this dates back to the pandemic. Rates dropped, and rates were really high. So on this chart, the higher these green lines, that means rates have been increasing really since January of last year, let's call it. But one key thing that they did is they topped out in November of 22. So go to the next slide. This is a 2-year look back. Then the next slide is sort of a 1-year look back. So then look at the 1 year, the 1 year slide. That's going to really show you how in November of 22 the rates topped out, and then look at kind of where we are today. Now, we had a nice little bounce over the last week because of that inflation number coming in low. So we've definitely come back. But look at kind of where we are over the year. We're still at about half of kind of where rates were back in August. So a year ago, we still have higher rates than we did a year ago, but we're on, I feel like, the right track. Now, of course, we've had a lot of bounces. I mean, this is literally month over month, week over week. You see a lot of up and down movement. That's just what happens. And the way I explain rates in a very simple way is that like 6%, 7%, that rate doesn't change every day. What changes every day is the cost to get the rate. So what you're seeing, that green and red, that is actually the changing of the rate on a day. I'm sorry, the changing of the cost of the rate on a daily basis. And we've all, you may know that you can buy rates down, or you can actually take higher rates and get a credit towards your closing costs. There's sort of two ways to do it. And so this is just kind of again, a 1 year look back to go, hey, we're not quite to the best rates we've had in a year, but we're getting there. And if you go to the 6 month look, I love this one, because this one really says, okay, well, where have we been over the last 6 months? Look at all these arrows, up, down, up, down, up, down. This is just meaning lots of volatility. And a lot of it has to do with just the commentary, like sentiment in the market, like what an economist says, or what the Fed says on one time versus another. Just a lot of up and down, up and down, up and down. And I think the good news is, if you look here at the very far end in the right, July, look, we had a nice little bounce and run up in rates. And so can we keep moving in that direction? I think only time will tell. A lot of it would kind of go back to that economy slide, where we're really talking about jobs and inflation. As long as that continues moving in the right direction, we're in a good place. And again, the best rates we've had in the last 6 months was in February. So if we can get through that period and get back maybe in the next couple of months and get back to that, I think then we can have some real solid momentum with people thinking, okay, rates are finally moving in the right direction, and you might see even more buyers come to the market.
All right. So I got a great question via text, and we're getting one via chat. Someone asked via text, they said, we said that the best rates were in February, and they said February actually here shows the highest. It looks like it's higher. So these are the actual bond costs, and as the yield on a bond goes up, then the interest rate comes down. Am I saying it correctly, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, right. The bottom line is, think of this as like in reverse. So high, right, on this chart means rates were low, and when it's low on the chart, that means rates are high.
Right. So as the bond cost gets higher, that means the yield is higher that they're paying out. So actually the rate comes
down.
The rate comes down. And so here you can see there's also, in case you're wondering like what these triangles are, this is actually an alert to lock, right? So we're actually coming in, and we've got a procedure built in with our team. When we get an alert to lock, they get notified, so we can lock interest rates for any loan that's under contract and ready to close. And it's how we save money. So like when we locked up here, you can see that the market kept deteriorating, alert to lock. So you can see my cursor as we go down, and it kept deteriorating, and then you can see it kind of bounced off up here, and then you kind of ride the escalator back up. These are all resistance lines that are in here. So don't get too nerdy with this. This is from a service that we subscribe to called MBS Highway, and if you're familiar with Barry Habib, it's his company, if you've heard of him. And so great question from David around if people are doing ARMs or fixed rates. Right now, ARMs are not inexpensive. ARMs are tied to the shorter term interest rates, and the yield curve is actually inverted right now, meaning that it's actually cheaper right now for longer rates than shorter rates, which is opposite of how common sense should be. So ARMs are actually not priced competitively. So that's why people are doing, fixed rate loans. And ultimately, for me personally, I actually think the spike that we had, so this down here last week was 7% rates. You can see we had actually a really good day. Green is good. Like this was a great day today because of the inflation report that Matt showed earlier on. And, but I think when it hits 7%, I talked to a lot of you buyers who are on here, and you were like, oh, well, gosh, now it's at 7 and you're all waiting for 5. And so what I think is going to happen is that the people who noticed in the media that rates were at 7 are going to be like, hey, wait a second. Now I'm really not waiting until 5.5 anymore. Now maybe I'm waiting until 6.5 again because I missed it at 6.5, right? I mean, in here, it's kind of when we were in this 6.5, 6.75 range. And so I feel like for you folks who are waiting to buy, that you really want to buy ahead of the craziness, right? And I would just talk to the loan officer on our team about the different temporary buy down options, and then just know that if you're a realtor or a buyer, that we've got discounted refinance opportunities in the future that our company has green lighted us to be able to offer when we're refinancing the folks who are doing either non-temporary buy down because they couldn't get a seller to pay for it, or who are doing the temporary buy down and when rates drop want to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. And of course, Todd, you could talk about the buyer guide, but email or go on to bookspanbaker.com/guide and you can get your buyer or seller guide.
Yeah, it's just a great tool that we just offer. It just has some great information for you to know if you're thinking about buying or selling, just some other questions that you can ask your real estate agent. Or if you're a real estate agent, it's just a great tool to be able to guide your clients towards to give them the things that they should be thinking about as they go through the process. And so we've had really good feedback on that. We've been using that for years. And
of course, we just want to leave you with a phone number and some takeaway, so if you need to email us, or if you can call us, and we'd be more than happy if you have a question offline that you want to ask or have a specific scenario on. We're happy to run those numbers for you. And we do spend a good amount of time breaking down with a client kind of some of this conversation, but also really looking at options. I think a lot of times you feel like you talk to a big box bank and they just say, well, here's your rate, have a nice day. And we really like to break it out and look at, well, what are your options? Because you all have options. You can buy the rate down. You can take a higher rate. You can do a temporary buy down. You can do, MI buyouts. You could do, there's lots of things that you can do. And so it's really important that you take the time to call one of us so that we can walk you through that, especially if you're in the middle of that buying decision.
Yeah. And so, kind of as we close it out, want to say just a couple of things. Number one is we appreciate your time, right? Whether you're watching this live or you're watching a video, you invested time to educate yourself. Number two is we would love any offline questions you have. So if you feel like there's something that didn't make sense or you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to either Matt or myself. The main number there rings to the two of us at once, or some of you probably have our direct lines, or you can reach us out on social media. And then the last thing, we would love your feedback. Our goal is to keep this brief, and our goal is to make it so it's valuable, technical, but not too technical that it doesn't make sense. I feel like data is what helps people see the why behind the things that are happening. And what I love is that Matt is equally, if not more passionate about it than me, and is out there teaching it in the marketplace. Any of you who run teams or brokerages who would like Matt to show up via live or in Zoom to teach, he's always happy to do that, and I am as well.
And I think the last question that we had is, what's a good message that you can pass along to your clients, or to, a good message for people, that are looking to buy? Should I buy now or wait? You never want to time the market from a rate perspective. It never works out, right? Because by the time you go under contract, rates could have moved already. The key is, if you find a house or you need to buy a house for regardless of reason, whether you're upsizing, downsizing, right sizing, whatever you want to call it, the key is buy the house, get it, because you can always time a refinance later. And if you believe that the market has slowed, like there's less buyers in the market today than there was a year or 2 years ago, and then you believe that when rates improve, that's going to shift and buyers are going to come back, well, then even more important is to buy now so that you aren't in competition with those new buyers. Because again, it's going to be hard to find stuff. And I really believe that as rates improve, inventory is not going to magically right size either. So you just got to, I think, buy now and we'll refinance you later. We got discounts, but let's importantly is get the word out. And we thank you for coming today and joining us. But that keeps us. Hey, Todd, we beat ourselves by a minute. We're 28 minutes.
We didn't quite get the 15 to 20 minute. We'll still get there eventually.
We squeaked it in perfectly.
All right, y'all. Thanks again. We appreciate you watching and look forward to hearing your feedback.
Have a great one.